You mentioned Monero before.
You're asking me to reveal my wall of shame, aren't you?
I have to ask this question, unfortunately.
I'm Bitcoin only now.
What's your impressions of El Salvador?
I'd love to say that you can buy everything with Bitcoin, but you can't. So I've been twice. I actually found that there were slightly fewer bases to pay with Bitcoin on my second visit than my first visit. Most of the country is still very much dollar-based. Just the PR the country's got, it really has put El Salvador on the world stage.
What was you expecting before the approval?
Well, that is a brilliant question. So what I was expecting, and I did, there's no point denying this because I wrote about it quite extensively. I did expect a very significant uptick very quickly. Bitcoin doesn't care what you do with it. It doesn't stop someone in Africa using Bitcoin as a medium of exchange or a store of value in another country. It doesn't, the network's completely capable of dealing with all of this.
The first thing I noticed when I came across your profile and I researched a little bit about you was that you have a book called How to Explain Bitcoin to Your Mom. And this was nice because my mom has Bitcoin, but she's not. Yes, she has, and she's not. She's actually not a Bitcoiner. Like, she's not really convinced about it. She's like, oh, it's some investing stuff, some new stuff, some modern stuff. And I always try to explain it to her, but I did not go through that she really understands it. But she has Bitcoin because she loves me. That's basically the explanation. But how do you explain Bitcoin to your mom? Like, how can I explain it better to my mom?
Listen, if it was easy, I wouldn't have written an entire book. Yeah. So you've got to understand, like, in my case, my mum, I put this into the introduction, but my mum spent years telling people that I work for a company called Microwave instead of a large, well-known software company. So that was her kind of level of understanding of technology. Now, she still doesn't have the internet. Even to this day, she doesn't see the point of it. In fact, she still blames me for the demise of the high street because of the growth of the internet, like it's somehow my fault for working at Microwave. So that's my starting point. The other thing is, she doesn't even have a mobile phone. So that's how out of the technology is. I should say she has got a mobile phone now, but it's a pay-as-you-go one. And she never turns it on because she doesn't like to waste the battery. So it doesn't help us. So look, trying to go in and explain this was impossible. And I don't think either of us came out of it particularly well. So that led to the inspiration of, right, if I can explain it to my mum in a book, then we've got a chance of explaining it to anyone. So I wrote this book. It's quite old now, though. It's 2018, this book. But the concepts are still valid, but some of the data is now out of date. And I try to just explain it in a nice, sort of friendly, light-hearted, slightly humorous way. Very slow journey through money and why it's different and why you should look into it.
Yeah, it's interesting because in the first stages, when you try something to explain something simple in simple terms, you're always like, oh, explain it to me like I'm 5 years old. But it seems like young people, like even under 10 years old, they get Bitcoin quicker because they have digital things they value. Like, they have a video game, they buy skins, they buy stuff digitally, and they naturally add them with value. They're like, oh, of course, this digital thing has value. So for them to jump to the conclusion, oh yeah, Bitcoin also has value, is sometimes easier for older folks that, like, as your mom, is not even on the internet. So that's an interesting thing to do. Like, explain it to mom, not like a 5-year-old.
Well, exactly. And that was the challenge. But you're absolutely right, because the next generation do already understand the concept of digital scarcity through boxes in games and that kind of stuff. So they get it already. It's not that big a leap. But for my mum, the whole thing was just so out there. It was tricky. So that was the challenge. She did read it, by the way, slightly under duress, but she did read it. It's helped a bit, but she hasn't got any Bitcoin, so put it that way.
And you came into Bitcoin, I think, as you write in your Twitter bio, in 2016, which is an interesting time because you have the high in 2013 with, like, I think over $1,000, and in 2016, if I'm not mistaken, it went never over the $1,000 mark. So it's like a longer bear phase. but it was on the uprise. How did you discover Bitcoin, and how did you explain it to yourself?
Well, the first time I discovered it actually was in 2013, so it was quite early on. And I actually read about it in a newspaper article just by chance. I was on the train and I read this thing and I couldn't understand it at all, what they were talking about. So, of course, I Googled it, which was a terrible mistake because, uh, I was just inundated with articles about why it was a scam and wouldn't work. And having a sort of an economic background, I Googled, this is an even bigger mistake, what do economists think of Bitcoin? So, I've got Paul Krugman and Peter Schiff and all these guys saying, it's a disaster. So I left it alone, and based on that tiny bit of research, and I lost 3 years because, that Google search could have gone a different way, but it didn't. And so those guys have got a lot to answer for. But ultimately I ended up taking the long way round. So it was 16 when I decided, look, I'm going to have to buy some, whether I understand it or not, because I could see the number go up. And that bit I did understand. So I thought, right, I'll get some. And I remember apologizing to my other half, actually. And I told her, I'm so sorry I've left it so long, because I really thought I was late. Right? Everyone thinks they're late to Bitcoin, everyone. So I apologize. I managed to get some, managed to not lose it, which was the next thing. And that started me on learning about it. And as well, Robin, as everyone else, once you actually make the decision to learn about it, then the world opens up to you and you can't unsee it. And once you're in, you're in.
It's interesting. I had a similar experience. I mean, but for me, it was even more extreme because I heard it the first time in 2017. I was 19 at the time, and I dismissed it as a scam. I was investing in stocks. I had quite a few successes, especially with Tesla. I had, I think, also a little bit of luck there, and I always dismissed it as a scam because I wasn't the Warren Buffett mindset. Asset has to have a cash flow. It's
Yeah.
gold is nothing, Bitcoin is nothing. I had this kind of mindset. And so in 2020, more people, because of my successes in the stock market, came up to me and said, like, oh, what do you think of Bitcoin? And I discovered that I don't have good arguments against Bitcoin, actually. And so I went on this weekend streak where I'm like, this weekend I will get arguments against Bitcoin. And on the quest of finding things against Bitcoin, I discovered Bitcoin and I bought the Monday afterwards. So it's interesting how people are getting orange pilled and how they get into Bitcoin, and it's crazy. And it's this kind of motivation you get when you find Bitcoin. As you are also, I think you probably did something else before Bitcoin, and you did not. Uh, uh, Speak so much about Bitcoin before you discovered Bitcoin. Like, what did you do before, and what did motivate you then to talk so much about Bitcoin and write the book about it and explain it to so many people?
Yeah, it's quite a big jump, I suppose. And obviously, I was at uni, can you believe, in the late 80s? So that's going back a while. And my degree was sort of management focused, but I specialised actually in law. And because I found it really interesting, and I like to hear myself talk, so I thought it'd be, a barrister or something would be pretty cool. But then I realised there was a lot of work involved with that, and years of work. So I thought, right, I'll do something easier. So I went into marketing because you could just make that up, really. I found myself after a few years in the corporate world at Microsoft. Did 5 or 6 years at Microsoft, and I actually started a number of little small businesses here. They always had an entrepreneurial sort of side, and actually set up a chain of internet cafes and game zones around the UK, and what we call the home counties here in the UK. Just at the time, they really took off. So remember, internet was terrible then. So we paid something like £40,000 a year to have this. I think it was 128k line. All the computer share, which was super fast at the time. And then I just opened more and more of these. And actually, it was towards the end of that period, because I did it for years, running these different internet cafes. We had 23 employees at the peak of it. So we did really go for it.
Cool.
and we were the longest running chain, and I want to say it's the largest chain in the UK, which wasn't saying very much because we didn't have that many branches, but they were all independents. So when I finally did get my head around the Bitcoin thing, the first thing I thought was, how can I mine this? Not that I really understood it, but I knew that I could mine. I'd missed the CPU days and I'd missed the graphics card days, but of course I did have all these computers. So I realized I could mine Monero because you could do that with GPUs. And I thought, well, I can mine Monero or sell my hash to NiceHash, and then I can, acquire more Bitcoin. So we're now in 2017. And all the time I'm reading about this and I'm thinking, this is just like the internet was in the 90s. And remember, I was right at the cutting edge of that in the 90s as a young man, and it was super exciting. So I was about 24, 25, it's probably around your age now, I guess. But, I was helping drive the adoption of the internet. In fact, that was my role at Microsoft, was to do this. So to have that experience was amazing. And now, as a much older man, I'm thinking I could do this again. I've got a second chance. I mean, how cool is that? Nobody gets two goes. So I thought, right, I've got to learn more about this. So that was when, obviously, I started ramping up the mining side, using the downtime of the computers. That led me to learning more about it, and it led me ultimately to the decision: internet cafes are coming to the end of their lifespan. I need to sell these, move somehow into Bitcoin. Didn't know how, but I knew that I wanted to be involved. I knew the buzz was the same. This open source network had the same, if not greater, power than the internet. So I did. That's what I did. I sold the cafes, sold them all, and just decided I'm going to do Bitcoin. That was it. That's what I said to my missus. I'm going to do Bitcoin. And she said, what does that mean? I said, well, I don't really know yet. I just know that I'm going to do Bitcoin. And it just started... similar to you, I think, which is, lots of Twitter, lots of learning, lots of listening, and it just, things developed from there. And great, and I'm very, very pleased I made that decision, by the way.
Was that the moment when RenewaBlox started and your Bitcoin driver career?
Well, that RenewaBlox came much later. That's what's happening now. But up until then, I was doing some consultancy work for Luno in the UK. In fact, I was running the Bitcoin pioneers and the Bitcoin hodlers communities here in the UK. And the fact that only stopped really at the end of last year because the FCA regs created all sorts of complications, so we couldn't really carry it on in the format that it was running. But also, I've been mining now, large-scale mining, for 5 years through Siberian Mine, who I got to know very well back in the early days as they were setting up, and sort of maintain that sort of contact and relationship, and spent some time actually on the mining facilities. And I've really been ramping that up over the last year. And then, of course, I think you're referring to Bitcoin racing.
Yeah,
you can probably see my suit still there, but behind me, looking at me, sort of hoping that we'll have another season. Well, we'll see, right? So, last year was my rookie year as a racing driver. At 52, suddenly decided to become a racing driver. With, of course, the Bitcoin racing team, who I bumped into through the Bitcoin pioneers work that I was doing. They reached out, we got to know each other, got on really well. Then we all went together to El Salvador twice to as guests of the government to meet with some senior people there, including the vice president and others, to discuss the endorsement of the team by El Salvador, which they did give. They did give their endorsement. So that's why we have the flags on the roof. And then, of course, we needed some more drivers. We already had one great driver, who's Chris McKenzie, who's part of the team, and part of the family that runs the team. And so 3 other rookie drivers came in, and I was one of them. So what a fabulous year it was. Slightly terrifying, but what a buzz.
Amazing. What is RenewaBlox actually all about?
RenewaBlox is, I've been working with these guys for some time. I actually bought 2.5% of the company a year or so ago, I think, because what they were trying to do was kind of marry Bitcoin mining, which of course you can tell I'm very passionate about, with renewable energy, which I'm also passionate about. But these guys really know their stuff when it comes to renewable energy. And the problem that we've got around the world with renewable energy is that when you want to put for example, a solar project together, say you want to build a 20 megawatt solar project, and you say, right, we're going to build this and we're going to connect it up to the grid, and Bob's your uncle, off we go. Now, the trouble is, most national grids, including in the UK, and actually most national grids really I can think of, are really designed for sort of centralized, stable power sources. They're not really designed for variable, decentralized power sources. So now, whenever you bring these things online, you've got to upgrade the infrastructure. And in some cases, it's really difficult and really expensive, and it can take years. I mean, there are waiting times of over a decade. And you can end up with situations where projects are actually being built and then can't be connected. I mean, there's actually a few quite famous examples in the UK. So power's being produced, it doesn't go anywhere, which is madness, right? I mean, obviously, you don't normally get to that stage. Normally don't build it out until they're closer, but it does happen. So what we've done is we've said, okay, let's model out what would happen if we could monetize that energy before it's connected to the grid. So can we come up with a kind of bespoke solution where we can rock up, agree terms with that energy provider, whatever stage they're at, and say, right, well, we can monetize that power in the early stages. And you could do that as a partnership, you could do it as a joint venture, you could literally sell us the power. There's all kinds of different bespoke ways that we could do that. So that was the concept. And we've explored this over quite a long period of time. Then I joined the company. It's only a small startup, just a handful of guys, as chief operating officer in October, and then took on 10% of the company. And in the meantime, we've got some partners in America, joint venture that we've signed there. We've acquired 160 acres of land to deploy our first operation. That's going to be solar and Bitcoin mining. It's kind of a proof of concept, but also there's a good revenue opportunity there as well. And we have a number of leads with other things that we're looking at. And actually, as it happens, we're in a seed raise round now. And if you want to find out more about this, because I'll talk about this all day, so we better move on before I really go off on one. But I would say to you, look, if you're interested in having a look at what we're doing here, because we have attracted quite a lot of interest from some of the more prominent names in the industry as well. We'll reveal more on that later on. But you can go to our WeFunder page, which is WeFunder/RenewaBlox. Sorry, WeFunder.com/RenewaBlox, I think it is. Check it out. We'll put it in the show notes anyway, I'm sure. But it's a great opportunity. It's open now. It's only open for another couple of months, and you can invest. We've made it so anyone can invest as well. So you get the same terms if you're investing $100 as if you're investing $100,000. So yeah, check it out. I love it. It's really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to working this project over the next few years.
Yeah, it will be everywhere in the show notes. And of course, also this podcast will be also launched on X directly. So people can just click on your tag and see your profile. And I think it's already also in the bio in there.
Yeah,
perfect.
It is.
Future of mining. I always I really like the example with Texas where they balance the grid with the miners. You also bring in next example in there where big grids that are getting launched and maybe need a monetization till they're actually getting launched. That's amazing. Where do you see Bitcoin mining evolving from 10 15 years ago where every BC could mine Bitcoin? Now we're at this stage where it gets really big and a massive business also, where public companies are involved, or Bitcoin mining companies are public companies. How do you see it evolving in the next 10, 20 years?
I mean, that's an amazingly long time scale for Bitcoin, of course, and we're only 15 years in now. And to be honest, we are, this is part of the excitement of it, right? I mean, we are forging a new path and no one's really sure what direction we're going to go in. I think the things we can be fairly certain about is that the relationship between renewable energy and Bitcoin mining is just going to keep growing. And I think those two industries will come closer and closer together. I mean, the stuff we'll talk about, RenewaBlox, is a good example of that. And there will be other people who do similar things or go off in slightly different directions. But I think that's inevitable. There's lots of different ways we could go with this because, you know, there is concern, for example, about decentralization. About centralization of mining. And in some ways, that's a fair argument because it could be one of those things. You know, one of the arguments we always say about proof of stake is it's really not, you know, it's about who's got the most money ultimately, right? So you can force your way into the network money. It's not quite the same with Bitcoin, but you can kind of see the argument if someone comes along and they've got $100 million and they buy $100 million of mines and they've got a good arrangement, which they can probably force with $100 million of mining, then you can argue there's a case of centralization there. It's not quite to the same degree, but it's an angle. I don't think we have any cause for concern right now, just for the record, by the way. Maybe in 5, 10, 15 years' time, there might be. It's a trend that we have to keep an eye on. But you know, the rest of this answer is pretty vague because we don't really know where we're going to go. But I do see renewable energy, Bitcoin mining, more hand in hand. I do see the hash rate continuing to go up. I do see difficulty continuing to go up, and I do see you know, continued innovation in the actual miners themselves. So I think those things we can be certain of. The actual shape, I don't know yet.
Does it surprise you that the hash rate is going up like in a straight line, basically, and the price of Bitcoin is like not like it's not coupled in any way? So right now, at least when you look at the short term, maybe if you look like 5, 10-year trends, then it's kind of coupled. But if you look at the short term trends, it just seems like more Bitcoin miners are going online, more investment in Bitcoin miners, and we're not even close to the all-time high of Bitcoin from 2021.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, because if you zoom out and look at that hash rate chart, it is almost, you know, straight up and to the right if you do sort of a trend line. You know, it doesn't really surprise me, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. There are a lot of people, and I do disagree with this actually most of the time. There are a lot of people say, oh, yeah, Bitcoin's reached a new high in terms of hash rate, so price will follow. I don't necessarily agree with that because in many ways, it's sort of a production cost. And that's kind of separate from the market side of Bitcoin. If you're into trading and stuff, I mean, this is not really my area because I don't trade. I've written a couple of articles about trading and basically telling people just how rubbish I am at it. So that's why I don't trade. So I just think long term and invest long term. So I don't necessarily agree that the cost of production really does drive the market. Although, you know, I've had long debates with people over that particular point. So yeah, it's really a measure of confidence, isn't it? You know, miners will not deploy unless they are confident in Bitcoin itself, their own bottom lines, and the future. That's it. So hash rate really is a measure of miner confidence. I'm a miner. I'm very confident. I've been adding to my fleet quite significantly in the last couple of months, even though the Bitcoin price is lower, because I do believe long term it will be higher. And I do believe that you have to now factor in the halving, because that's only 90 odd days away. I don't know how many it is, somewhere around 90 days. Yeah. So now you've got to think ahead, because I've already mined through on a large scale one halving, and you know, the dynamics do change. It does get a bit crazy for a little while leading up to it and afterwards.
I'm super excited to announce that this podcast just got the first ever sponsor. I just started the podcast out like 3 months ago, and now we have 21 Bitcoin as a partner for this podcast. 21 Bitcoin is Bitcoin only from day one, and they teach and preach self-custody. This is my go-to exchange when someone asks me, oh, where can I buy my Bitcoin from? This is the easiest entry for Bitcoiners. And if you want lower fees, plus at the same time support this podcast, use code Robin and click the link in the description. How does the dynamic change in the halving cycle for the miners? Like the rewards obviously get halved, but how does that play out on like half on the mining side?
Well, I mean, last time round, for example, on the build up to it, everyone switched pretty much everything on, right? So it didn't matter how crappy your old machines were. You know, you're ramping them up to try and get that reward before it halved to where it is now. So it was that was lot 12.5, wasn't it, before? So, but straight afterwards, there was a fairly rapid decline in hash rate because, of course, those machines, a lot of those machines, then immediately became unviable. So we shut it down. You just saw this kind of really quite sharp line downwards, which of course then adjusted the difficulty, which kind of offset some of the halving. So there's this wonderful dance between this hash rate and difficulty. But then it will stabilize over time. You'll see that, creep back up again. So I expect we'll see the same thing. I expect everyone will power everything up right up to the last minute. But there are a lot of older gen machines out there still operating, which will finally reach end of life, and they'll be scrapped, or some people will keep them just in case, because sometimes it can go crazy again, and you can get squeeze a little bit more juice out.
It's hard. It's my first halving actually, because I got in 2020, but kind of after the halving. So it's my first halving where I'm really involved in the Bitcoin community, and I'm really looking forward to it. Like people are like looking forward to it like the Super Bowl. it's a similar event, I think, in the Bitcoin community. And
yeah, I mean, as a miner, it is on your mind quite a lot, because you have to plan correctly, because you can get this wrong. I mean, for example, there's a lot of really quite cheap miners around at the moment, which are sort of 40, 42 watts terahash. That's really high, because obviously the new generation is 1x, sort of 18, 19, something like that. So those guys are really going to dominate in the next cycle.
You mentioned Monero before, and I posted something before that you always come in because of Bitcoin, and then a lot of cycles go. And also my journey was like that you got into Bitcoin, then you get a lot of cryptos in your portfolio and get like the crypto expert, and then all of the sudden to the end it gets to Bitcoin only portfolio. At least a lot of people have that experience. Did you also experience with altcoins, or are you still experienced with altcoins? How's your portfolio going?
You're asking me to reveal my wall of shame, aren't you? Yeah.
I'm a bit
Yes.
rather have to ask this question, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm Bitcoin only now, but I think the journey. I think you've described it perfectly. I think it's normal for most people. You discover Bitcoin. For me, it was Bitcoin and then the other coins. Sometimes I know it's the other way around. It's crypto and then Bitcoin. So I discovered Bitcoin and then fell for all this coin's going to be better than Bitcoin stuff before I understood the tech behind it. Before I understood the centralization and the control and the way that crypto basically are like equities, really, in the sense that you're really betting on a company and a group of people, effectively. So yeah, I did it. I played with everything. I think I had it all at one stage. I went Neo, Cardano, IOTA, XRP. I wrote a couple of articles about XRP, ETH. I mean, I had about 50. I think I'm not going to list them all, but there were loads in there. Most of which have gone now. But actually, I mean, still got some stuff from the old days still sitting in wallets somewhere. And I always say that as soon as the next cycle comes along, I'll just get rid of those and move it into Bitcoin.
Yeah, I also got rid of, I think, the last kind of dust it was like a year ago. I went through everything, and then I discovered one MetaMask wallet from the old days. And then I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, there's still something in it." That was like $100 worth of something, and I just quickly converted it to Bitcoin, and now I got really clean. No,
Yeah. You're
nothing else.
completely clean now. Yeah, I've still got some stuff hanging around, but it's earmarked for disposal at the right time. I mean, if I could turn it into a couple of miners, I'd be very happy with that.
Yeah, you have. Is there a El Salvador flag in the background? I wondered that.
It is. Yep. So I've been out there a couple of times. I love the place.
What's your impressions of El Salvador and the adoption there? I never was there, and I really want to go there this November with the Bitcoin adoption with the conference. And I always wondered, like, this is Bitcoin for me is a bottom up approach, like in the most basic sense. But El Salvador is kind of a top down, like it. Of course, it started with Bitcoin Beach, and it was kind of a grassroots movement. But then the president pushed it from the top down also. How do you see the adoption there? And can you buy everything with Bitcoin there? Is like, how's the experience, if you can share?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to say that you can buy everything with Bitcoin, but you can't. It is a long way to go. So I've been twice. My last visit it was last year. So yes, yes, it was a year ago, almost. So I actually found that there were slightly fewer places to pay with Bitcoin on my second visit than my first visit.
Mm.
And actually, most of the time I was in San Salvador, which is the capital. Obviously, went over to El Zonte as well. Check that out. And there's a reasonable number of places you can pay with Bitcoin. And of course, I did the obligatory buying coffee videos and McDonald's videos, but lots of independent traders as well. Now, outside of the city, really, there's very few places apart from El Zonte and a couple of other little hotspots. But most of the country is still very much dollar based. Now, I can also say there is a lot of focus on education and promotion. So I do think this will change over time, but it's not a short job. And I don't think Bukele ever considered it to be a short job. I think he realized this was going to be, you know, a long slog, but they seem to be up for it. And there's no question that the country is very upbeat. It's very confident. It's very relaxed. I find it quite emotional actually, because you can see the hope in people's eyes, which was not there before when the gangs were running the place, and they really did run the place. So these people, they think, oh, I can go for a walk, I can start a business, I can do stuff without worrying about getting killed or kidnapped. It's incredible. So there's a lot of opportunity there, and that really came across to me. And I think that country really is going places.
That's amazing. Yeah, I look closely at that place, and I had like two people on that I actually almost kind of living in El Salvador. They are not 100% there, but they're like 40-50% there. And actually tomorrow I have a couple there that both moved there, and they shared the story also online, and I'm really looking forward to that one. And it's interesting to see because Nayib Bukele basically took the adoption of Bitcoin and moved it forward in his own country with the hopes that a lot of Bitcoin businesses and Bitcoin itself bring hope to the country with a lot of economic power and with a lot of yeah, good people that have a lot of bright minds in them. And
Yeah.
I think he will do really good.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you've seen just the PR the country's got as well. I mean, it really has put El Salvador on the world stage. I mean, obviously, we can say, well, look, maybe we're a little bit blinkered because we're looking at X, but actually, it's out there in mainstream media. Normally, people bashing it, particularly anything which is linked to the IMF and any TradFi stuff, just trying to really give them a hard time. But I think it's unstoppable. And they're good. I reckon they're going to do it. I really do.
Yeah, me too. I saw also some articles on Medium of you, and the one that stood out to me was the Bitcoin ETF one. I followed the Bitcoin ETF quite closely, and you basically said, like you made an article, what will happen once the Bitcoin ETF will be approved. I think the effects of the Bitcoin ETF will be more long term. It's not a lot like, oh, it's going to be approved and it's in that day a lot of things happening, and a lot of people hoped for like a god candle with 100K in the first hour.
Mhm.
What was you expecting before the approval, and how were you surprised, or how were your expectations met?
Well, that is a brilliant question. There's a long way from, there's a lot of places we can go with this one as well. But so let me try and summarize it a bit. I mean, I actually wrote, I think, 6 or 7 articles on the ETF leading up to it. So, will we have one? What will happen? What will happen if it isn't approved? What needs to happen? So, I've really got quite into the whole ETF idea because obviously we've been talking about it for 10 years. I mean, the Winklevoss twins put their application in 2013. It's incredible, really. Uh, excuse me. So, so what I was expecting, and I did. There's no point denying this because I wrote about it quite extensively. I did expect a very significant uptick very quickly, and I based that on the fact that we'd had 2 dry runs. So we had the Coin Telegraph announcement. Do you remember that in October? Oh yes, it's
Yes.
approved.
Yeah.
Immediately we saw an uptick, and that was only a small number of people really who saw that because it was retracted very quickly and disproved very quickly. And yet we had this really significant move. So clearly there were people waiting for this. It wasn't priced in at that point. Then, of course, we had the SEC hack, or whatever you want to call it, and we had the same thing, right? We had another move. So I thought, well, by then I was totally convinced, right? We've seen it twice. Obviously, as soon as this approval happens, we're going to see this massive uptick. And then, of course, and I'm sure you were following it as closely as I was. I mean, the day was just a disaster because, we obviously had that problem. And then they did announce it, but no one was convinced then that it was real. And then they put it on the website. The website went down. Did you see that? Right. So the actual announcement fell off the website. So at that point, it was like, I'm not getting involved with this until we absolutely know what's going on here. So by the time we got to that sort of third time round, everyone's going, nah, I'm not moving until I know what everyone else is going to do. So I think we lost the opportunity for that kind of speculative trading candle tap because the momentum never materialized. And you know as well as I do, it's all about momentum, right? As soon as you move quickly, you liquidate the shorts and that creates more momentum and off you go. So we didn't get that part. But I didn't factor in, and I'm not sure many of us did really, the outflows from Grayscale in the first few days were that significant that really they offset a lot of the inflows and therefore the market price. In actual fact, we've traded pretty much sideways as a result ever since. So we are going to see a longer term effect. I've got no doubt about that. But I did expect to be a much bigger impact earlier on. And so I stand corrected.
I mean, the SSC hack, I think it really dried it down and made everyone unsure, because I had 2 live streams on the second day when it was announced. And on the first day it was announced, I was a little late, and I was already going to sleep, and I was like, what, it's announced? And then I was like seeing it, and then I was like, oh, it's the official account. Then I posted like a thing that I already prepared when it's approved, and I posted it. At that post, like, I have 8,000 followers. I usually get, when a post performs good, maybe 3,000 to 4,000 views in the first hour. That post got 5,000 to 6,000 views in the first, I don't know, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. Like
Yeah.
it went completely insane. And I got like 100 messages. It's not approved. It's not approved. It's not approved. It's not approved.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then I was like, what are you speaking about? And then I was like going to the SEC account, and then I was going to everybody's like, Gary Gensler, and I was like, what heck? Who do I trust now, Gary Gensler or the SEC?
I mean, what a bizarre thing. It really was.
And then on the next day, of course, I looked at the streams, and people are like, this document comes out, that exchange listed that, this is coming out, and like, okay, it seems more and more logical, more and more people saying, oh, it will come, but it was not that, okay, now it came. Like that moment
Yeah,
never was there. It was just like spread over a longer period of time, and this,
yeah.
as you said, it destroyed momentum. So I 100% agree with you here.
Yeah, and I think that would have changed things. I think there would have been that speculative burst. I mean, probably would have come down again, actually, given what we now know with the outflows and what have you. But so maybe, leverage traders were very pleased about that, but they shouldn't be doing it in the first place. So we'll never know. Right, we'll never know. It is what it is, but we know the long-term effect. We can be fairly clear about that, I think.
What do you see about the long-term effects? Like, I think there's just an enormous amount of like first capital coming in the space that is unlocked, and the second part is like there's a lot of eyeballs also coming in, and a lot of older people that first did not speak about Bitcoin all of a sudden speak about Bitcoin, and all the salesperson also about in the ETFs and the funds that all of a sudden saying to all the clients and the high net worth individuals, buy Bitcoin. See, we have also this now in the thing. And like, how do you see this all playing out in the like next few years?
Yeah, well, I think there's several things. I mean, look, they weren't shy about putting their TV ads out, right? Because we've all seen those on Twitter, and they do vary in quality quite a lot. But the point is, they went out and they spent a chunk of money on promoting it. But you also know that behind the scenes, there are going to be a lot of really salespeople going out and pitching clients and pitching the middlemen who deal with the clients to really sort of tell people this Bitcoin thing is pretty cool. You can put some money in, you can do it now, you can do it with us. So whether, the main operators behind these organizations really understand Bitcoin, we know some of them do. We're not 100% sure on some of them. Whether their objective is to drive Bitcoin, which I don't think it is so much, or to generate revenues, which I think it probably is more to do with, they are going to go and sell this. And that they're going to sell it on quite a large scale for quite a long time, because they know there is a latent interest to some degree. So that's the main thing is they're now switched from being either passive or neutral or not promoting to switching to going out there and being massively promoting it in any way, shape or form they can. I mean, I'll be interested to see what the Super Bowl ads are this year, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see some quite significant ETF ads in there. So we'll see. But that's the biggest change. Now that will take time to filter through. And we can argue, whether it's a good thing for Bitcoin or not, because I know there's two sides to that argument as well. But ultimately, they will be hoovering up big chunks of Bitcoin, and it will go into their funds.
Yeah, I mean the argument about is it good or bad about Bitcoin? I think it's pretty easy. I think because if Bitcoin is actually the sound money as we all see it as the resistant asset that we are seeing it, if a Bitcoin ETF kills it, then it was never that what we thought it is. So
you're absolutely right. That's a really simple statement, but it's a really effective one. And the thing is, as I always say to these people, they're going to hold this money and they can do this, blah, blah, blah. I say, well, it doesn't really matter. I mean, Bitcoin doesn't care what you do with it. It doesn't stop someone in Africa using Bitcoin as a medium of exchange or a store of value in another country. It doesn't, the network's completely capable of dealing with all of this simultaneously. So kind of irrelevant what we do with it. It's just going to keep ticking over. So there's room for all of it, even though at first it doesn't seem that way numerically, right? Because you just think, 21 million coins, it can't be done. But actually, of course, you and I both know that that's not quite how that works.
That's very true. Yeah. We're coming closer to the end, and we're having an interesting end routine in the podcast where the previous guest asked the next guest, without knowing who the next guest is, a question. And your question is: when is the last time you paid for something in Bitcoin, and which product and services would you like to pay in Bitcoin in the future?
Probably, I would normally say everything, because I like to have that choice. I always ask if I go to a restaurant or something, my family rolls their eyes sometimes, but I always say, do you accept Bitcoin? Usually knowing the answer is no, but I always think, if everyone asks that question, it'll catch on over time. The last thing I actually bought with Bitcoin was a pint of beer. There is there's obviously a few pubs around now, but there are companies like Bridge to Bitcoin who go around setting these places up. So I think it was before Christmas though, so it's been a good month, I think. So it's actually, because I'm a bit tight on Bitcoin as well, I should make that clear. But that was a couple of pints of beer at the pub. So that was my last purchase.
That's an amazing strategy to keep just asking about Bitcoin. You know Red Bull, probably. It's an Austrian company, the energy drinks. And in the beginning, the Mateschitz, the founder, tried to get into all the restaurants, but nobody knew Red Bull and nobody liked Red Bull. It's like it was like you have to get in the restaurants so you get to the contribution that everybody is known. And he just paid people in the disco and the restaurants to ask for Red Bull. He's like, here, you have 10 euros, please ask for Red Bull. Here, have 10 euros and ask for Red Bull. And so
Brilliant.
in that way, he got more leverage when he goes to the restaurant or the disco or the pub. Would you like to also feature Red Bull in your beverage thing? And it's kind of the same thing we are doing as Bitcoiners, the really hardcore Bitcoiners. And I try to do it. I don't do it as much as I should do it, but every time some Bitcoiner asks for, can I buy Bitcoin in this? It's in their mind. It's something that came up. And if it's the second time a guy asks in a week, or the third time or the fifth time, it will be a discussion at some point in some business meetings. And it's that grassroots movement that slowly gets more and more people in. And we need that for sure. So I highly appreciate every Bitcoiner that does that because it's kind of awkward in public, but it's kind of necessary.
I think so. And it's kind of fun. I mean, you do get a range of responses. You don't really often get, I don't know what that is anymore, confusion. Now it's changed over the years. So quite often you still obviously get mostly a no. But every now and again, it can lead to an interesting conversation. Oh, I've heard of that. What is that? And so on and so forth. So that's what we want more of, right? And just over time, we'll get there.
I also have one more thing in that regard. There are like Lightning Tips company where you can just print a page out with QR codes on there, and you can preload them with a few satoshis. And you can basically tip the waiters Bitcoin with it. And you can also see it in your dashboard then, like from 10 tips I gave out, 5 already redeemed them. Whatever they are doing with it, but they basically had to deal with the Lightning Network. They had to deal with Bitcoin to redeem it. And that's also a nice way to introduce Bitcoin in the public, where you just like, I give you like a few fiat tips, but there's also a Satoshi tip for you. And
do you know, that's a really obvious thing to do, and I don't know why I haven't thought of that actually. I mean, I have set people up with Lightning wallets and done it that way, but that's even easier, in fact, because you could just put a couple of lines of information, where to get more information on this and what's just happened. There's all kinds of stuff you could do with that. It's pretty obvious, actually.
Yeah, I forgot the company that is doing that. It's just a site where you can just download it. I tried it. I did it once at Christmas, and I gave everybody in my family just the cards.
And did anyone take it?
Yes. Everybody took it, but I have a hard time in my family. Like the closer people are to me, the more they have Bitcoin. It's like I have a cousin that is really close to me. He is all in Bitcoin. He's now 19. I'm amazed at him, how far he has gone down the rabbit hole and how deep he understands the whole financial system. Like he's really good. I was not at his level at all in this age. Then there is, of course, my dad, who understood it because he understood gold before, and then it's just the digital aspect of it. And my mom, we talked about it. My sister also has it, but more because she trusts in my abilities and not because she trusts in Bitcoin. So that's the situation. But I think more and more get to it. So,
Yeah.
And you also successfully orange pilling your family, or is it?
Well, I think it's like you. I mean, look, no man is a prophet in their own land, right? So let's be clear about that. Your family, you know, your own family always knows your idiosyncrasies and the weird stuff that you've done, you know, in the past, and they can't help think of that when they're saying, "Oh, look, there's this, you know, hard money system." So look, I do have some members of the family who have the same as you actually, you know, who are really into Bitcoin, and you know they're mining now, and you know they do spend a lot of their time talking about it. But we do have other members of the family who will absolutely take the mick any opportunity they can possibly get to have a go. So you know it's a wide range. So look, I think you just have to take the rough and the smooth, not engage, obviously, not get confrontational about it. Just a bit of a laugh with them, just say, well, you know, it's what I believe in, and I do think it will affect you ultimately. But you know, when you're ready, have a learn, and if you're not, don't worry about it. Just carry on doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I think this is the general sense as a Bitcoiner. You should open everyone with, like, you should welcome everyone with open arms. You should never force someone into learning it, because you cannot force it anyways. It has to come with some sort of interest. To wrap it up, where can people find you? Where can people find out more about you, getting in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite active on Twitter. I don't think I'm as active as you, to be honest, Robin. I think you're really going for it. I always read your tweets. So you can find me, Jason Deane, on Twitter. That's a normal place you can go. Obviously, RenewaBlox.com. It's only a static page at the moment, which really directs you to the WeFunder, but you can find me there, and of course on LinkedIn as well. But and my DMs are open on Twitter, so I always say people don't hesitate to get in touch. Just drop me a line. I always answer. So yeah, shout me.
Thank you for being on, Jason.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Lovely to meet you, Robin, and hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Of course.